Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes and strolling barefoot through a lost royal garden in the heart of the ancient Khmer Empire. The air is thick with jasmine, the ground is still warm from the day's sun, and somewhere nearby, a monkey shrieks at a frog like it owes him money. The gardens of Angkor, once bustling with barefoot courtiers and gossipy monks, now hum softly with wind through leaves and the whisper of forgotten fruit trees. You're not here as a guest. No, tonight, you belong here. You'll wander through palace orchards once tended by servants who knew which tree the queen favored and which mangoes were cursed. You'll lean against a crumbling stone ledge, once, part of a sacred pool where the scent of fermented sap still lingers. You'll swat at lazy mosquitoes and admire how even the weeds seem more dignified in a 12th century empire. You probably won't survive this, by the way, unless you can. Fight off jungle cats, digest unwashed lychees, and outcharm a bored royal elephant. But let's not dwell on that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far-flung, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice as you step into the palace garden is the way everything seems taller than it should be. Trees lean over you like ancient relatives, their limbs twisted from centuries of reaching for the sun. The royal mango groves stretch endlessly to the west, their roots wriggling under broken flagstones. You pass rows of small stone basins, ritual foot baths maybe, or just ambitious bird feeders. It's late in the evening, the kind where even your shadow seems sleepy. The air is warm, not oppressively so, but heavy, with the kind of humidity that makes your shirt cling to you like a needy spirit. The Khmer royalty chose this hour to stroll, not just because it was cooler, but because the garden became a theater. The fading sunlight filtered through the palms, the scent of bruised fruit hung thick, and the occasional temple bell gave the illusion that time still mattered. This wasn't just for show. The gardens were power. In the Khmer Empire, to grow exotic fruits in your backyard was to say, "Look how far my reach extends." That pomelo, a gift from a Javanese king, the pomegranate tree, a stolen cutting from champa smuggled in a spice crate. Historians still argue whether these fruits were truly diplomatic imports or just local varieties rebranded with imperial flair. But really, what's the difference when you serve them on a golden platter? You stroll past a shallow pond where lily pads hover like lazy coins. In the center stands a faded statue of a woman holding what looks suspiciously like a guava. It's unclear whether she's a goddess or just someone who really enjoyed tropical snacks. Either way, the guava is carved with such reverence, you begin to wonder if there's a deeper fruit worship cult lurking behind the smiling monks. And here's a mainstream fact to sink your teeth into. The gardens of Angkor were irrigated using a sophisticated system of canals and reservoirs, the barays. These enormous waterworks weren't just practical, they were symbolic too. Controlling water meant controlling life, crops, and by extension, the gods' moods. So imagine, every mango tree here was pampered by a hydraulic prayer. You stop near a low stone bench, one leg of which has long given up and collapsed under the weight of centuries. A half-eaten fruit lies nearby, something milky, maybe a star, apple, or a leftover prank from a time-traveling tourist. You don't touch it. There's something so oddly calming about this place. The ruins don't feel abandoned, they feel paused, like the gardeners just went off for lunch 400 years ago and forgot to come back. And while historians are still unsure exactly how many varieties of fruit the Khmer cultivated, one dusty French botanist did count 87 types of edible plants depicted in Angkor's carvings alone. Of course, he also claimed to have been chased by a psychic duck. So, Grain of salt. You keep walking. Fireflies begin to appear, blinking lazily like they've got nowhere better to be. A thin path curves to the right, deeper into the fruiting heart of the royal estate. On either side, the trees grow denser, their roots braided like old dancers' feet. You pass a cluster of unfamiliar trees, low and tangled, their bark oddly smooth, almost waxy, and then, hanging just out of reach, a small spiky fruit that looks like it was designed to be difficult. Maybe a baby durian, maybe something older, stranger, now extinct, except for this stubborn branch. You reach up. It smells like overripe sugar and wet stone. You pull your hand back. Probably best not to start the journey with digestive roulette. Somewhere in the canopy a bird calls, not the melodic kind. More like a surprised cough. You laugh softly to yourself until a second cough comes from a little too close. That's fine. Jungle ghosts don't show up until after midnight, right? Back to the path. You follow a stream now, low and slow, its edges littered with fallen fruit husks. A banana leaf flutters down in front of you like a lazy dancer. You step over it and continue. Ahead you catch sight of something glowing faintly. Not firelight. Bioluminescent fungus, perhaps. Or maybe just the moon catching the white skin of some fruit you've never seen before. The royal gardens are not maps. They are mazes, designed not for efficiency, but for contemplation and subtle awe. Each turn is a chance to find a fruit you never expected, or to be found by one, and just when you start wondering whether you've gone in circles, you reach the first marker of courtly order, a smooth basalt slab carved with vines and delicate script, and at its center, a single fruit in relief. A mango split open, its seed like an eye staring back. Welcome to the Khmer Empire, traveler. The mangoes are watching. You keep walking, and the mangoes thicken around you like an audience. Their trunks are twisted but proud, and the branches stretch wide like parasols. Some trees are so old they lean on wooden crutches, a trick borrowed from ancient caretakers who believed a tree that grew sideways still deserved to be royal. You duck under one low-hanging limb and inhale. The air is syrupy, thick with the scent of ripe fruit and wet bark. Tonight, you're walking through a grove where kings once strolled barefoot. This was the divine court's mango walk. Not just any mangoes, of course. These were known as kawai mayas, or golden veins. They say the fruit glowed at dusk and tasted like sunlight if sunlight had a hint of ginger. Naturally, it was reserved for royal mouths only. If a servant was caught eating one, their punishment involved a week of latrine duty and a strongly worded curse from the palace astrologer. You pause beneath a tree whose bark is carved with faint script. Not religious verses, inventory notes. Khmer scribes etched ripening schedules into trees, tracking which mangoes bloomed earlier, which needed shade, and which just weren't trying hard enough this year. A kind of fruity bureaucracy. One mango lands near your foot with a muted thump. You pick it up. It's warm, still pulsing with sun. The skin is golden green, blushed pink where it was kissed by sunset. You roll it in your hand, feel the soft weight of it, and wonder how many forgotten rulers once judged this same fruit in their palms, debating whether to eat it now or save it for the afternoon performance of court dancers. Mangoes weren't just snacks. They were social currency. You could bribe a minor official with the right mango, or insult a noble by offering one with a spot. One traveler wrote of a feast where 20 varieties were served in gilded bowls, arranged from least to most spiritually cool. The coldest mango, legend had it, could cure jealousy and reduce sweating. The hottest? Best eaten before battle, or confession. And here's your mainstream fact. Khmer agriculture was remarkably advanced for its time. Using a combination of raised beds, canal-fed irrigation, and sun-tracking planting, they could grow fruit nearly year-round, often harvesting multiple crops from the same tree in a season. Mangoes, with their adaptable nature, were stars of the royal garden. But there's a fringe theory, whispered mostly by botanists with too much time and possibly too much fermented palm wine, that a now extinct variety of mango once grew here, deep purple and shaped like a teardrop. Supposedly, it had the taste of cinnamon and river water. One colonial-era monk claimed to have seen a carving of this phantom mango on a temple wall, but no one's been able to locate it since. Historians still argue whether he was hallucinating or onto something. You pass a cluster of mango trees growing in tight formation, their roots knotted together like gossiping ants. These, you learn, are the ceremonial trees. Their fruit wasn't eaten but used in rituals, peeled, sliced, and arranged into delicate, flower-like spirals. Monks would chant over them, then float them in lotus ponds to honor the water spirits. One Khmer queen was said to have bathed in mango-scented water every new moon, whether it granted her beauty or just made her a mosquito. Magnet will never know. You step off the main path and find a clearing. A low stone bench, mostly swallowed by moss, invites you to sit. Nearby, a rusted iron bowl lies half buried, its purpose unclear. A fruit dryer, a cooking dish, or just something that fell out of a trader's cart 300 years ago and decided to stay. The silence here isn't empty. It buzzes faintly, bugs, leaves, memory. A mango drops far off, and you swear it echoes. You imagine a servant, centuries ago, kneeling beside this bench, sorting mangoes into offering, eating, and not worth the drama. Beneath your fingers, the stone is cool and worn smooth. Someone else has sat here, many someone else's probably. You wonder if they also leaned back and watched the mango leaves twitch in the moonlight, like they were trying to remember a dance they once knew. Suddenly, a breeze stirs the canopy, and dozens of mangoes tremble above you. The wind carries their scent in waves, first sweet, then musky, then a sudden sharp tang that feels almost like warning. You smile. Even now the mango trees have opinions. You rise and walk on. The trees begin to thin slightly, the grove giving way to a more open patch where smaller fruit trees peek out, children compared to the towering mangoes. A sign, perhaps, that you're entering a different zone of the garden, but you'll always remember this grove, these trees, these mangoes. Even now, hundreds of years after the fall of Angkor, descendants of these trees still grow in scattered villages across Cambodia. Farmers claim the taste is different now, less intense, less magical. Others swear that with the right rain and patience, you can still find one that sings of palaces and golden bowls. You reach the edge of the grove, where a small arch of crumbling stone once marked the entrance to the divine court's orchard. Carved into the lintel, barely visible, are 2 mangoes and a tiny smile. Perhaps it's a joke, or maybe a warning. After all, in the Khmer Empire, even fruit had secrets. You step beneath it and leave the mangoes behind, for now. Beyond the mango grove, the air begins to shift. It carries a gentler scent now, lighter, more floral, with just a hint of fermenting sweetness underneath. You follow a curved stone path, its edges softened by centuries of creeping moss and wandering vines. The trees here are shorter, the trunks thinner, and their bark a delicate silver. These are no ordinary fruit trees. These are the tamarind courts. Unlike the showy mangoes with their golden skins and royal airs, the tamarind trees are quiet, understated. You wouldn't notice them at first glance until you see the curled seed pods dangling like dried fish from their branches. These are the fruits of patience and of persistence. This section of the garden, according to fragile scrolls found in Angkor's temple libraries, was reserved for the king's personal healers. Tamarind pulp was a prized ingredient in ancient Khmer medicine, used to cool the body, cleanse the stomach, and, depending on who you ask, soften the soul. You walk slowly here. Even the ground feels more careful. Your sandals crunch softly. On fallen pods, their brittle husks popping like faint firecrackers. The smell of tamarind is hard to describe, sour and sharp but comforting, like the ghost of a childhood candy. Somewhere in the branches above, a night bird sings 3 descending notes and then goes mysteriously quiet. Suspicious. Here's a mainstream fact. Tamarind has been used for centuries across Asia, not only as food and flavoring, but as a tool in medicine and preservation. In Khmer court life, it flavored royal stews and acted as a natural meat tenderizer, though whether that says more about their culinary preferences or their royal butchers is still up for debate. You pause beneath a particularly large tamarind tree, its branches gnarled like fingers mid-gesture. A rope once hung here, not for executions, but to suspend clay pots filled with water and crushed tamarind leaves. The water would infuse slowly, dripping into basins beneath, a kind of royal spa treatment. It was said to refresh the skin and, more importantly, ward off courtly envy. Historians still argue whether this grove was exclusively medicinal or if it doubled as a training ground for apprentice healers. Some even believe the Khmer queens conducted secret tea ceremonies here under moonlight, sipping tamarind infusions laced with jungle herbs and political advice. You imagine a scene. The queen in silken robes, cross-legged beneath this very tree, holding a steaming clay cup. A young herbalist kneels beside her, reciting the recipe in a whisper. Nearby, guards pretend not to listen while swatting at midges. In the distance, frogs argue. The tamarind grove has a way of softening sound. Your footsteps barely echo, even. The wind seems to hush itself. The trees sway politely when you pass, as if nodding in recognition. Now, a fringe tidbit. One poorly preserved stone relief discovered near Angkor, Tom depicts what some believe is a royal tamarind pressing ceremony. Several officials are shown surrounding a strange machine, a cross between a wine press and a grain mill, while a monk pours something viscous into a large basin. Scholars can't agree whether this scene shows medicine, preparation, winemaking, or just very intense jelly production. One eccentric academic insists it's an early fruit-powered weather device. Nobody invites him to conferences anymore. You find a small square clearing ahead, bordered by short stone pillars. The tops are flat, as if designed to hold small jars. You spot a few fragments, pottery shards, bits of glass, even a tiny clay figurine of a monkey holding a tamarind pod. Its face is carved with exaggerated sorrow, possibly representing digestion, troubles, or perhaps just dramatic flair. To your left, a shallow basin still holds stagnant rainwater. A tamarind pod floats lazily within it, swollen and waterlogged. You lean in. The surface is still. No frogs, no insects, just the slow drift of time and forgotten fruit. You linger here longer than you meant to. It's that kind of place, but kind where your thoughts trail off and take a nap without telling you. Eventually, you stand and move on, following the path as it curves around a low hill. Small tamarind trees line the trail, each one tagged centuries ago with little ivory plaques, now cracked or missing entirely. These may have marked varietals or perhaps who planted each tree. One local legend says royal children were each given a tamarind tree at birth to tend until they turned 16. If the tree survived, so did their right to inherit land. If not, well, nobody wanted to disappoint a tree. A sudden breeze rustles the canopy, sending dozens of dried pods cascading down in soft clatters. You flinch. One hits your shoulder and bounces harmlessly away. The tree shrugs. Nothing personal. You finally emerge at the far end of the grove, where a narrow stone bridge crosses a stream so clear you can count the pebbles. Small fruits float downstream. Tamarind pods, yes, but also a few guava skins, a banana leaf, even what looks suspiciously like a papaya peel. Evidence that the royal kitchens, or perhaps curious animals, are still snacking upstream. You pause on the bridge and look back. The tamarind trees sway again, whispering secrets in a language you almost remember, and just before you move on, you notice a carving in the bridge's edge. Two hands holding a tamarind pod, gently split open. Inside, the seed glows with an inlay of dark jade, perhaps a warning or an invitation. You don't look back again. The path turns soft under your feet, gravel giving way to packed earth. You're deeper into the garden now, and the trees start to look unfamiliar, foreign even, as if they snuck in from another continent and decided never to leave. Their leaves are spade-shaped, their bark is smooth, and hanging from the branches are clusters of round, glossy fruits in vivid yellow. And red. You're entering the starfruit quarter. The Khmer called it ple croc sok, the fruit of smiling ribs. It's easy to see why. When sliced crosswise, each piece of starfruit resembles a five-pointed star, or a giggling ribcage, depending on how hungry or poetic you're feeling. You reach out to touch one, and its skin is waxy, warm, and dimpled, like the side of a candle that's been held too long. In this part of the royal garden, fruit wasn't just for food or medicine, it was for storytelling. Starfruit trees lined the pathways that led to the palace library, where poets and astrologers met in the cool afternoons to recite epics or predict who was most likely to offend the gods next week. The idea was that the trees would whisper inspiration, or maybe eavesdrop. Mainstream fact, starfruit was likely introduced into the Khmer Empire through trade routes stretching from India to Malaysia, along with cardamom, turmeric, and several other dreamy ingredients that reshaped Khmer cuisine. The empire's cooks, always eager to impress the gods and the high priest's picky stomach, turned starfruit into syrups, pickles, and even perfumes. Its high acidity made it a natural mouth cleanser between courses, though a few unlucky monks reportedly learned the hard way not to mix it with wine. You stroll beneath the canopy now, and the light flickers through the star-shaped leaves. Everything has a soft, green-gold glow. A few bees drift by, too lazy to sting, too full of nectar to care. You stop at a carved stone pedestal. On top sits a stone bowl, wide and shallow, and inside are fossilized slices of starfruit. Not an offering, an experiment. These were once dried under sunlight and preserved with salt and honey. It was believed the resulting crystallized fruit could sharpen memory or seduce a bureaucrat. A fringe tidbit. One courtier's diary rescued from a collapsed temple and now mostly nibbled by insects mentions a midnight game called Sampot Sray, skirt dice, played only during lunar eclipses. Participants placed bets on how many seeds were inside a starfruit chosen at random. If your guess was right, you kept your head wrap. If not, you sang a love song to the royal fish pond. Apparently, it was all great fun unless the high priest walked by. You sit for a moment beside the pedestal and take in the quiet. Somewhere nearby, the gentle clack of stone wind chimes stirs. Perhaps a leftover from the nearby poet's rest house, or maybe just a wandering breeze playing with old bones. Either way, it suits the mood. This part of the garden feels light, playful, less burdened by politics or illness or taxes. Historians still argue whether this section of the garden was truly designed for intellectuals or simply ended up that way because the starfruit grew best in the thin shade near the east wall. There's little documentation, and what remains mostly describes gossip about one scholar's suspicious fondness for guava juice. Speaking of guava, you spot a small side trail where a few wild guava trees lean drunkenly over a broken fence. Their fruit lies scattered on the ground like coins tossed by a bored king. The air here smells tart and sugary. Your stomach growls. It's understandable. You keep walking, and the starfruit trees begin to cluster more tightly, their roots crossing over each other like gossiping neighbors. A small shrine emerges on your right. 3 bricks high, crowned with a stone relief of a child holding a fruit with exaggerated starry edges. You can't tell whether it's a protective spirit or just a very enthusiastic vendor. A bowl rests at the shrine's base. Inside are 3 offerings, 1 dried starfruit, 1 folded banana leaf, and a stick of what might be incense or might be a melted pencil. Someone remembered this place. Not recently, but not too long ago either. You bow your head slightly, out of habit, respect, or rhythm, or just the way this walk is going tonight. The air is getting thicker again, warmer. Somewhere a bird lets out a high-pitched whoop and is immediately embarrassed. As you approach the far edge of the starfruit quarter, the trees grow thinner. You spot a rusted wheelbarrow half sunk into the soil, its contents long emptied, its handle wrapped with a vine like a lazy embrace. The last tree here bears no fruit, just leaves, and one oddly persistent spiderweb shaped, curiously, like a 5-pointed star. You smile and move forward. The path narrows now, the ground giving off a warm, sweet aroma, earth mingled with something dark and sticky. You recognize it before you even see it, the unmistakable scent of sapodilla. The Khmer called it plail mut, the fruit of secrets. You're entering the hidden orchard. Here, the trees are shorter and bushier. Their bark flakes in delicate scaly plates, and their leaves are so dark they seem to drink the light. The fruits themselves are rough-skinned, round or oval, and covered in fine fuzz like a peach with secrets. If mangoes were extroverts and starfruits were daydreamers, sapodilla was the quiet librarian with a flask of brandy hidden in their robe. You reach up and gently touch one. The skin is firm, but there's a give to it, softness under pressure. A little like court politics, now that you think about it. Mainstream fact. Sapodilla is native to Central America, but made its way to Southeast Asia via ancient maritime trade, long before most textbooks ever mentioned the region's sea power. The Khmer Empire's naval merchants were notorious for bringing back strange fruits, and sometimes stranger animals, and incorporating them into royal diets, whether the cooks liked it or not. Sapodilla stuck around likely because once it ripens it tastes like brown sugar mixed with pear, with just a hint of sleepiness. You walk past a crumbling stone bench, its surface worn smooth by centuries of scholars, servants, or sleep-deprived gardeners sneaking bites between shifts. The bench faces a small clearing, a garden within the garden, where sapodilla trees stand in a near-perfect circle. In the center, a single tree with unusually twisted branches juts upward like a raised hand trying to ask a forbidden question. Fringe tidbit. Khmer tradition held that lovers would meet secretly in the sapodilla grove. The fruit was said to sweeten the tongue and calm nerves, helpful traits when planning to confess your undying affection to someone whose family happens to own a war elephant. In fact, a poem discovered, scratched into the wall of a monastery, reads, "She smiled beneath the sapodilla tree, as if my foolish poem had flavor. I tasted her laugh, and the fruit spoiled after. Some say the poet was executed. Others say he was promoted." Historians still argue whether the poem was about a real court affair or simply metaphorical fruit addiction. You duck under a low branch. The sapodilla fruit dangles close to your face now. You breathe in deeply. The sweetness is almost overripe. Somewhere, a bee hovers, reconsiders, and zips away. You imagine a young prince sitting here centuries ago, scribbling into a palm leaf journal, sapodilla juice on his fingers. He's trying to document every variety of fruit in the garden before his father marries him off to a noble woman from the highlands. You wonder if he ever finished. You wonder if she liked fruit. You brush your fingers over a carving on the side. Of one tree, a heart roughly etched, encircling 2 characters. The script is Old Khmer, barely legible. You think it might translate to, "May our sweetness outlast kingdoms," or maybe, "Do not steal this fruit." Hard to say. You sit beneath the central tree, the twisted one. Its roots poke out like ancient fingers. A small lizard darts across your boot and disappears into the grass. You look up. Between the leaves, a gap in the canopy lets in a shaft of moonlight, turning the fuzzed fruits above into golden marbles. It's oddly spiritual here, like a natural shrine. It's said that royal cooks would wait until nightfall to harvest sapodilla, believing the fruit was more fragrant by moonlight. Whether that's true or just a clever excuse to avoid daytime work is unclear. Either way, the practice became tradition. Somewhere in a crumbling cookbook is a line that translates loosely to, "Cut not the secret fruit in haste. Wait for the moon or risk its silence." You rise and move toward the edge of the orchard. The trees thin out, revealing a long wooden trellis ahead, sagging under the weight of hanging vines. The smell shifts again, less sweet, more green. But before you go, you glance back at the sapodilla circle. For a moment, you think you see movement, a flick of a robe, a smile, a whisper of a forgotten rendezvous. But no, just fruit. Just time doing what it always does. You step forward, into the vines. The vines curl like question marks, each tendril reaching, grasping, wrapping around anything that dares to be still too long. You step carefully, brushing aside loose leaves as the trellis groans gently overhead. The garden becomes a tunnel now, green and warm and alive with the quiet rustle of small creatures going about their nighttime business. Welcome to the world of Trakuan Thnat, or as you might call it, Khmer snake gourd. Mainstream fact: snake gourd, long, curling, and often mistaken for some kind of overgrown sea creature, was a staple in Khmer palace kitchens. Not a fruit for dessert trays, no, but still treasured. Its vines were woven into vertical gardens that framed the royal kitchens themselves. Young cooks would pluck the slender gourds straight from the trellis and toss them into earthen pots with coconut milk, lemongrass, and a liberal scoop of fermented fish paste. As you walk under the hanging vines, the gourds swing gently like lazy pendulums. One brushes your shoulder, cool, firm, and oddly musical, as if it's full of secrets waiting to rattle out if shaken just right. A fringe tidbit: the gourds were once used to measure time during festivals. A bowl of water would be filled and a small dried gourd slice floated on top. A hole drilled in the bottom would let water in, sinking the slice slowly. When it vanished below the surface, a drum would sound, dance, eat, light the firecrackers. Repeat. It's questionable science, sure, but it kept the party moving. The air is damp here, not unpleasantly so, but enough to soften your sandals. A few crickets chirp half-heartedly in the underbrush, then give up. You're in the quiet belly of the garden now, and it smells like growth, like patience. You notice a small stone marker nestled among the roots. A spiral symbol is carved into it, ancient Khmer for loop or return. Perhaps it marked the start of a kitchen path, or perhaps it was the empire's polite way of saying, "You're not lost, you're just going in circles." Historians still argue whether snake gourd was planted here because of its flavor, its cooling properties during the hot season, or simply because it amused the queen. One surviving letter from a court gardener claims she believed the vines could predict weather. When the gourds pointed downward, she said, it would rain. When they coiled upward, time to harvest rice. Whether she was a proto-meteorologist or just extremely bored is still debated. As you move deeper, the vines thicken, casting dappled shadows across your path. The moonlight flickers through like a slow-motion lantern show. You spot a worn bamboo ladder leaning against the trellis, maybe left behind by a harvest team, or maybe just forgotten. There is a half-woven basket at its base, still clinging to a few dried gourd rings, curled like cinnamon sticks. Someone once meant to finish that. They didn't. You pause beside a moss-covered bench carved directly from tree roots. You can almost picture a sleepy cook sitting here, waiting for the pot to boil. Maybe humming, maybe scolding a monkey for stealing ginger. You sit too and let the quiet gourd vine hush settle over you. Above you, one especially long gourd stretches, nearly to the ground. You reach up and give it a gentle knock. It makes a soft thunk like a water drum. Not surprising. Dried snake gourds were often repurposed into musical instruments or sound bombs to scare away birds. Children in the palace, according to one, Scroll, used them in mock battles, running around whacking each other and blaming the kitchen staff. That sounds about right. Somewhere to your left, a bird trills 3 short notes and stops. The garden holds its breath. You feel the path begin to open again. On the far end of the trellis, a small arched gate appears. Barely standing, its bamboo slats laced with vines that have grown fat and confident in their domination. You push gently through and emerge into a new space entirely. This one is brighter, airier. You can smell citrus on the breeze, sharp, sunny, and surprisingly bold after the gentle hush of the gourds. But before you leave the shade, you look back one last time at the tunnel of vines. They hang like green chandeliers, slow swaying, dream thick, heavy with fruit and forgotten conversations. The bench is already disappearing into the shadows. The ladder's outline blurs. One gourd swings lazily, then stillness. You step forward. Into the citrus grove. The citrus grove greets you like a splash of cold water, sharp, bright, and suddenly awake. The moonlight spills generously here, dappled through wide leaves, and illuminating the glossy skin of dozens of citrus fruits hanging like ornaments in a forgotten temple. You inhale. The scent is electrifying. Part lime, part honey, part memory. These are not your supermarket oranges. This is Croc Thlong, the Khmer citron, larger than a fist, ridged like the fingers of a closed hand, and often called Buddha's hand for its outstretched appearance. You reach up to one, marveling at its strange form. It doesn't look edible. It looks like something you'd offer a forest spirit in exchange for safe passage. Mainstream fact: citron was one of the earliest citrus fruits cultivated by humans, and Khmer gardeners grew multiple varieties for both culinary and ceremonial use. The peel was candied, the juice rarely used, and the fragrance was treasured. Royal chambers sometimes stored whole citrons in silk pouches to scent the air and ward off spirits. Think of it as medieval aromatherapy, only harder to pronounce. You step carefully along the path, noticing how the trees are spaced precisely. There's geometry at work here. Intentional planting patterns to guide airflow, encourage even ripening, and create the illusion of randomness. The Khmer weren't just gardeners, they were garden choreographers. Fringe tidbit: some citrons were considered so sacred they were not allowed to be eaten. One variety was reserved solely for blessing royal bathwater. Palace maids would slice the fruit into floating discs and let them bob on the surface like golden lotus petals. It's said the king once refused to bathe without it, even during drought. A monk reportedly called him a nobleman with noble stench. You step closer to a low stone wall, crumbling gently under the weight of a creeping vine. In its cracks grow tiny wild citrus, miniature versions bitter but powerful. You pop one open with your thumb. The oils spray like perfume. You resist the urge to taste it, barely. You remember something. Historians still argue whether Khmer citrus groves were primarily practical or symbolic. Some believe the groves represented prosperity and long life. Others say they were simply insurance against poor harvests elsewhere. The truth, as always, likely curls somewhere in between. You pause by a weathered sundial carved into the base of a citrus tree. Its gnomon, yes, that's the technical word, is missing, but the etchings are clear. Around the edge are 12 segments, each with a different fruit carved in low relief. Grapes, bananas, durian, pomegranate, even one that looks suspiciously like a pineapple. But at the top, at what must have been the noon position, is the citron, It was, you suspect, the king of the fruits here. You sit on a nearby stone bench half swallowed by moss. In your hand you roll a small citron back and forth. Its skin is bumpy, its ridges warm from the day's sun still held in memory. You wonder if the gardeners talked to their plants or named them. You wonder if there was a favorite tree, one that grew sweeter, taller, more fragrant than the rest. Perhaps this one. Perhaps you're sitting in its shade now. A light breeze stirs the branches above you, and a few petals fall, not from the citron, but from a neighboring tree, pale and soft and fragrant in a different way. It's a lemongrass bush, tall and swaying. Someone long ago must have thought to plant it here to balance the citrus, or maybe the plants chose each other, like shy neighbors. You stand. The citrus grove narrows, the trees guiding you toward a stone archway carved into the outer wall. The carving shows a single giant citron surrounded by stars, a cosmic fruit, a symbol of completeness, or just an artist who really liked snacks? You pass through the arch, your steps muffled by fallen petals. The grove closes behind you like a soft sigh. Ahead is a strange sound, bubbling, burbling, like laughter through water. You're heading toward the ponds. The sound reaches you first, a low rhythmic gurgle, like the belly of the earth is chuckling to itself. Then the coolness comes, a breeze that brushes against your neck, carrying with it the scent of wet stone, lotus blossoms, and something faintly metallic, like old coins dropped into a wishing well. You step out from under the citrus canopy and into a wide open space lined with square ponds. Their edges are cut so cleanly into the ground it feels more like architecture than landscape. This is no accidental marsh. This is the Khmer hydro garden system, meticulously crafted to reflect both heaven and utility. Mainstream fact. The royal gardens of Angkor were irrigated using an ingenious grid of ponds, channels, and moats. These reservoirs didn't just feed the fields. They also cooled the air, bred edible fish, and helped the fruit trees flourish during the dry season. The whole setup was a symphony of balance, form, and function wrapped in beauty. You walk to the edge of the nearest pond, your sandals making almost no sound on the softened earth. The water is perfectly still, mirroring the moon like a second sky. Lotus pads float lazily across the surface, some big enough to seat a cat, or, knowing the palace, probably a royal duck. One pad bears the ghost of a footprint. A child? A bird? You'll never know. Fringe tidbit, some of the ponds were seeded with the macaque fruit tree, also known as the Burmese grape. It grows in clusters like green marbles, sweet and sour, a favorite snack among royal children. The trees were trained to grow along the embankments, their roots dipping into the water. When the fruit ripened, it dropped into the pond with a splash, a soft plop that meant snack time. If you were quick and royal, you could scoop it out before the turtles did. And yes, there were turtles. As you step onto a mossy stone path between the ponds, you spot one now, ancient, slow, the size of a curled-up puppy. It lifts its head to look at you, then continues its glacial journey toward a clump of reeds. You nod in mutual respect. One pond in the center is different. Its water is darker, the surface unbroken, no pads, no frogs, no fruit, just reflection. You crouch beside it and notice strange carvings along the edge, crescent moons, fish with wings, a gourd split in half. Historians still argue whether this central pond served a practical irrigation purpose or held a ritual function. Some say it was for ceremonial bathing, others claim it mirrored the sky for astrological readings. A few believe it was just there to impress foreign envoys. Look, a courtier might whisper, even our water has a mood. A firefly lands on your hand. It pulses once, twice, then lifts off again, leaving a speck of warm glow behind. The air here is thick with that soft, bioluminescent twinkle, like a galaxy has been scattered at knee height. You move slowly, careful not to disturb anything. There's a wooden bench at the far end, its legs warped slightly from years of rain and heat. You sit, listening. The bubbling you heard earlier, it's from a bamboo fountain tucked into the shadows, an old Khmer invention. Water is poured into a tilting bamboo pipe until it tips, spills its contents into a basin, then resets. It ticks, like a sleepy metronome. Talk, pause, talk, 3 jokes into 1,000 words, right? Here's one for the night. A nobleman once tried to improve the bamboo fountain system by making them chime in harmony. He spent 3 months carving pipes of different lengths to make music. His masterpiece? A melody that accidentally mimicked the royal kitchen's dinner bell. Every time it played, servants dropped what they were doing and ran toward the pond. Chaos. He was banned from creative improvements for life. You smile. The water laps gently at the edges now, stirred by a breeze, or maybe just the turtles. Somewhere nearby, something splashes. Could be a frog, could be a fruit, could be the past coming up for air. The moon has shifted slightly, casting new shadows across the lotus pads. You see now that some of them are stitched with red thread. Why? A ritual? A joke? A love letter? You'll never know. You rise and walk to the far end of the pond complex, where the land rises into a low hill, on top a wooden arch strung with bells. Not metal, but dried fruit husks, tiny gourds hollowed out and painted in fading colors. You pass beneath them. The wind brushes them together in a sound like whispers and wind chimes and old laughter. Down the hill, a grove of sugar palms waits. The sugar palms stand like watchful sentinels, tall, slender, and slightly bowed, as if greeting you in silent ceremony. Their fronds rattle gently in the breeze, a sound somewhere between whisper and applause. You step lightly among them, your feet crunching over dry leaf fall and hardened earth. There's something reverent about this grove, less chaotic than the citrus, more grounded than the lotus ponds. This is the sugar zone, the sticky, sweet core of royal indulgence and survival alike, mainstream fact. Sugar palms were one of the Khmer Empire's most essential crops. From their tall trunks, gardeners tapped a clear, sweet sap, which was boiled down into a thick syrup or sugar cakes. These were used to preserve fruits, flavor rice dishes, and, of course, sweeten royal desserts. No ice cream back then, but let's just say Khmer mango sticky rice had an ancient cousin. You pass a row of clay pots still wedged between branches, forgotten sap collectors, or maybe ceremonial relics. They tilt at odd angles, catching moonlight in their hollow mouths. You gently knock one with your knuckle. It hums dully, like it remembers music. Fringe tidbit. The royal kitchens kept a sugar priest. Not a real priest, mind you, just a culinary title given to the man in charge of syrup quality. He'd taste test daily batches, announce their mood, cloudy, overboiled, morning rich, and decide which dishes could be served to nobility. Legend has it one sugar priest faked a sore throat for a week just so he wouldn't have to try a batch stirred by a superstitious apprentice who claimed it was cursed by a jealous monkey. The apprentice? Fired. The monkey? Unapologetic. You spot a half-buried stone jar at the base of one of the palms. Inside it, hardened sugar. Cakes lie fossilized in concentric layers like sediment. Someone once stored them here, perhaps during a siege or a drought. Sugar was more than a sweetener. It was calories, currency, even medicine. Mixed with herbs, it soothed sore throats. Mixed with tamarind, it allegedly summoned dreams. Historians still argue whether sugar palm groves like this were planted in a strategic order, north to south, east to west, or if they grew in more organic, community-led patterns. Theories abound. Some scholars believe the layout mirrored sacred geometry. Others think the trees just went where they pleased. Khmer gardeners were smart, but even they couldn't boss a palm around forever. You walk until the trees thin and the air grows even sweeter. You find a low stone table smeared with ancient dark patches. This was a boiling station, Palm sap would be poured into wide pans and stirred for hours over low fires. The process was as much about patience as temperature. One mistake, and the sap would caramelize too fast, hard, bitter, burnt. You crouch beside a faded fire pit, now filled with ash and wildflowers. Someone once sang here, "You're sure of it." The walls are etched with little spirals, notes, stars, doodles from a bored apprentice waiting for sugar to boil. You pick up a piece of fallen palm bark. It peels easily, like pages from an old notebook. And wouldn't you know it, some early manuscripts in Southeast Asia were written on dried palm leaves, not sugar palms, but cousins. Still, you can't help but imagine a secret recipe scratched onto one of these. The fronds above rustle again. A few seed pods fall to the ground with muffled thuds. One cracks open at your feet. The seed inside looks like a jelly-filled pearl. You touch it. It's soft, cool, strangely soothing. A palace maid once wrote of these seeds being served chilled, drizzled with syrup, and a sprig of mint. Not for the king, he didn't like slimy desserts, but for the queen's sister, who claimed they improved memory and reduced bad dreams. The sky has turned velvety now, deep indigo flecked with stars. The palms stand silhouetted, their heads haloed in moonlight. You walk toward the far end of the grove, where the earth slopes down into a shadowy glade. A small bamboo gate swings open without resistance. Beyond it, the wild fruits await. You duck through the bamboo gate, and suddenly everything feels different. Wilder, looser. The tidy symmetry of the royal gardens gives way to vines, thickets, and half-wild hedgerows that twist and meander like curious thoughts. This is the untamed corner of the Khmer royal estate, the wild fruit zone. Less cultivated, more exploratory. Think of it as nature's experimental pantry. The air is heavier here, rich with overripe sweetness and a hint of wet bark. The moonlight struggles to push through the dense canopy above, but what little filters down is enough to guide your feet along a narrow dirt path. Every few steps, something soft squishes underfoot. Fruitfall. You hope it's just that. Mainstream fact, the Khmer Empire had extensive botanical knowledge, and royal gardeners often maintained plots of semi-domesticated wild fruits, species, not yet tamed but considered worth watching. These included sour cherries, bitter plums, wild bananas, barely the size of your finger, and something called the mud apple, which, despite the name, was neither muddy nor particularly apple-like. It was sweet, fibrous, and supposedly made people sneeze if eaten too fast. You reach a low wooden sign, the carvings mostly worn away. But one image remains, a fruit shaped like a teardrop surrounded by swirls. Ah yes, the noni, a fruit that smells like blue cheese, tastes like fermented soap, and was somehow still beloved. A sleep aid, some said. A headache cure, claimed others. Or most commonly, a fruit you only eat if someone really important offers it to you. Fringe tidbit. There's a Khmer folk tale about a mischievous monk who tricked a royal gardener into planting an entire row of noni trees near the banquet hall. During a heat wave, the ripening stench overwhelmed everything. Dancers fainted. Guests fled. One ambassador from Champa reportedly wept into his soup. The monk promoted. Apparently the king had always hated banquets. You continue deeper into the grove, where the plants seem to crowd closer. There is a vine wrapped around a stone pillar, an old shrine, now moss-covered and fragrant with crushed berries. You pluck one, purple, black, soft, and the size of a marble. You hesitate. Then you bite. It's weird. Like licorice, if licorice was a fruit and had dreams of becoming pepper. Your tongue tingles. Your ears feel warmer. You're not sure if you're allergic or just enchanted. Historians still argue whether these wilder fruits were used mainly for medicine, experimentation, or desserts. Some records suggest they were only harvested during full moons, Others imply they were used in pre-battle meals to give warriors alertness and flexible thought. One dusty scroll even calls them thinking fruits, though no one knows quite what that meant. You reach a clearing now, lit in silver. In its center stands a lone tree, low, wide, with bark the color of tea leaves and fruit like miniature lanterns. You found it, the lamyai noi, a cousin of the longan, known for its transparent flesh and gentle floral taste. The name means little dragon's eye. In the old days, only the queen and her handmaidens were allowed to pick from this tree. It was said the fruit induced vivid dreams, sometimes of past lives, sometimes of future banquets. Either way, they wrote the dreams down and buried them in ceramic jars at the tree's base. You glance down. Sure enough, nestled in the roots are small broken pots. One fragment bears a faded drawing of a bird holding a fruit in its beak. Beneath it, a single word scratched in Old Khmer. Remember. The breeze carries a soft rustling. You turn, and there, by the tree line, a small animal sits watching you. A civet, big eyes, striped tail, nose twitching in your direction. It blinks slowly, then vanishes into the underbrush. You remember that some wild fruits were left unharvested deliberately to keep the animals fed. The royal garden wasn't just for humans. It was an ecosystem. A sudden splat behind you makes you jump. You turn. A fruit has fallen. Another follows. Then silence again. Maybe it's time to move on. As you walk toward a narrow exit path, your fingers brush a branch. Something sticks. Sap? No, it's soft. You glance at your hand, a smear of color. Bright red, almost luminous. You rub it gently. It smells like cinnamon and ash. Sleep fruit. Rare, almost mythical. Supposedly used in incense and ritual teas to induce peaceful dreams. Or maybe it's just a berry with good branding. You smile. You keep walking. The wild fruit grove yields to an open field now, where tall grasses shimmer like spun silk. The palace is near again, just beyond the rise, but before that, the spice orchard. The spice orchard announces itself long before you arrive. Sultry waves of fragrance drift toward you on the breeze, warm and grounding, like stepping into a dry sauna perfumed by 1,000 ancient cupboards. Cinnamon, cardamom, galangal, star anise, cloves, turmeric. It's less of a garden and more of a scent journey designed to hypnotize your senses. The terrain is drier here, the trees shorter, more knotted. Their trunks lean like old women gossiping. The soil is red gold and fragrant, touched with oils that have seeped into it for generations. You breathe deeply. This isn't the intoxicating sweetness of fruit or the cooling hush of lotus ponds. This is fire and medicine. This is kitchen and altar. This is spice. Mainstream fact. The Khmer Empire's spice orchard was considered sacred space, not just for culinary reasons, but spiritual and medicinal too. Royal physicians believed spices balanced the body's 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. Need better digestion, ginger tea, muscle aches, turmeric poultice, bad dreams, star anise under your pillow. A gardener walks by in your mind's eye, barefoot, apron stained with turmeric, hands yellowed from clove oil. He hums tunelessly as he scoops crushed cinnamon bark into a stone bowl. It's destined for the royal. Breakfast rice, served with a swirl of palm syrup and a topping of toasted sesame. Fringe tidbit. The royal kitchens also used spices to test for poison. One method involved sprinkling nutmeg over a sample of stew and watching for color changes. If it darkened unnaturally, something was wrong. Another involved feeding it to a chicken, a very unlucky chicken named Bayak. He was unofficially promoted to royal food taster and lived a surprisingly long life considering his job. Legend says he once fainted dramatically to avoid a second helping. You pass a section of spindly trees with dangling green pods. Cardamom, the queen of spices, some called it. In Khmer poetry, cardamom was a metaphor for shy glances and secret kisses. It flavored everything from medicinal teas to wedding confections. You pluck one pod. The scent bursts, cool, citrusy, a little peppery. You pocket it like a souvenir. Historians still argue whether the Khmer spice orchards were purely local, or stocked with goods brought in from trade, India, China, even Java. Some seeds were likely smuggled in by sea, carried in the hems of robes, or hidden in baskets of dried fish. One chronicler grumbled that spice hunters are thieves with good manners. You come across a shaded alcove surrounded by galangal shrubs, ginger's sharper, wilder cousin. The roots twist like fingers. They were once used in Khmer battle bombs, smeared onto warriors' limbs before battle to ignite the blood. Sounds dramatic, but modern science says galangal does have anti-inflammatory properties, so maybe they were onto something. You sit on a stone bench under a tamarind tree, its pods swinging low like sleepy commas. In front of you, a basin carved into the earth, lined with smooth river stones. This is where spice pastes were ground. You imagine the rhythmic thunk of pestle on stone, the smell of chili and lemongrass rising with each stroke. Not quite bedtime aromatherapy, but close, suddenly. You remember something tucked way back in your sleepy brain. That turmeric was used not only in food and medicine, but also in royal body paint. For festivals, dancers painted their arms gold with turmeric paste mixed with lime and crushed jasmine. The effect? Shimmering limbs that glowed in torchlight. A spectacle, sure, but also mosquito repellent. 2 birds, 1 root. A bird whistles, not metaphorically, an actual bird. Small, round, yellow-breasted. It pecks at a clove pod that's fallen to the path. You step aside, letting it eat in peace. You wander deeper through a corridor lined with turmeric plots. The plants wave their broad, banana-like leaves. Beneath them, the earth hums. Turmeric roots don't like the spotlight. They grow in secret, curled and patient, until summoned for soup or salve. There's a legend that says a lost Khmer prince was raised by jungle spirits and fed only turmeric and honey. When he returned, his skin gleamed like polished wood, and no blade could cut him. Was it metaphor, or just really good skin care? You reach the end of the orchard where spices fade into soft grasses again. Ahead lies the royal cooking pavilion, mostly collapsed now, but its scent lingers in the breeze, smoke, starch, spice, and sweat. You can almost hear laughter, not polite courtly giggles, real belly-deep kitchen cackling, and now your path curves toward one of the most secretive sections of the entire estate, the royal herbal nursery. Not quite food, not quite poison, but absolutely essential. You step onto a path more delicate now, paved with flat river stones and overhung with trellised vines. The air is quieter, tinged not with sweetness or spice, but something subtler: mint, lemongrass, crushed leaves, a note of sharp anise just under the surface. This is the Royal Herbal Nursery. It's peaceful, but not entirely soothing. There is a clinical undertone to this place, like the faint scent of a medieval apothecary. These plants weren't grown for flavor. They were cultivated for balance, restoration, and sometimes manipulation. Mainstream fact: the Khmer Royal Herbal Nurseries were central to their traditional medicine system, known today as Chim or Cru Khmer. Unlike the louder sections of the gardens, these plots were managed mostly by healers and priest-physicians. The plants here treated everything from snake bites and fevers to fatigue, melancholy, and yes, insomnia. You trail your hand along a row of pandan shrubs, long, spiky leaves used to wrap rice cakes, scent bathwater, and ease headaches when steeped in hot water. A few leaves flutter in the breeze, whispering like gossip. Just beyond that, rows of holy basil, not the kind you throw on pasta. This basil is darker, stronger, with a faint clove scent and a reputation for clearing the fog of foolishness, according to one Khmer proverb. Students were sometimes made to chew it before exams. You suspect it didn't help much, but it made the scribe smell great. Fringe tidbit. One legendary courtier claimed to have developed a tea using 6 herbs from this garden that allowed him to stay awake for 3 days straight. On the 4th day, he declared, he could see the future. On the 5th, he fell asleep standing up in the lotus pond and was gently carried out by gardeners. They planted more of his herbs out of respect, but kept the tea recipe, mostly a secret. You pass. A bed of kliangdang, red memory, they called it. A flowering herb said, to sharpen recall. Khmer midwives used it in labor rituals, so did judges before major hearings. Mixed with honey, it became a bedtime tonic for elders who feared forgetting their grandchildren's names. The flowers twitch, slightly as you pass, like tiny antennae sensing your presence. Now, historians still argue how much of Khmer medical knowledge was borrowed from India and China versus locally developed. The records are fragmentary, the oral traditions, well, mostly sung by very old women who refused to be rushed. Some herbs were indeed foreign, ginseng, gotukola, saffron. But others, like prakkan, a leaf so bitter it could burn the lies off your tongue, were uniquely local. At the center of the nursery is a sunken square garden bordered with woven reed fencing. It's the oldest part of this section, and also the most superstitious. Here grew the dreamer's mix, 4 plants believed to protect sleep and guide. Dreams, butterfly pea, blue ginger, moonfern, and the whispering leaf, which you're pretty sure was just lemon balm with a dramatic name. The butterfly pea catches your eye first. Brilliant indigo blossoms shaped like delicate wings, infused. Into tea they turned water midnight blue, sometimes shifting to purple with a squeeze of lime. Royal bedtime brews often used them steeped with lemongrass and palm flower sugar, not for flavor, though it was gentle, but for calming the stars in your blood. You reach down and touch a moonfern leaf. It folds up immediately, shy or startled. You smile. Even in sleep, some things stay sensitive. There is a bench under a mango tree, its trunk ancient, gnarled, and scarred by lightning, if the split bark is any clue. On the bench sits a ceramic bowl, glazed in jade green. Inside, dried herbs curled like tiny scrolls. You pick one up and inhale. Earthy, sharp, slightly floral. It's Khmer, a ghost herb. Used in ancestral rites, placed on altars and, if needed, burned. To clear bad sleep. What that meant exactly, no one agrees on. Nightmares, restlessness, marrying your cousin by mistake in a dream, interpretations vary. Fringe fact, one Khmer queen supposedly ordered an entire bath filled with steeped ghost herb after a particularly unsettling dream involving a winged crocodile and a golden fish that insulted her. Whether the bath helped is unclear, but afterward she forbade anyone from mentioning seafood during breakfast. A bell rings in the distance, soft and distant. You glance up, the garden is beginning to dim, not from the setting sun. You've long lost track of time, but from the thickening hush of night. Even the leaves seem to breathe slower now. You rise and continue through the last corridor of the herbal nursery. Ahead is a vine-draped archway, once painted, now cracked with moss. You step through, and suddenly everything shifts. You're entering the ceremonial grove, reserved for the rarest, strangest, most revered plants in the empire's knowledge. Some were used in coronations, some in funerals, others only during eclipses. It's not a loud place, but it is charged, the kind of place where you feel watched, but gently, curiously, and you, the sleeper, are welcome here. The ceremonial. Grove greets you like a temple with no walls. The air is cooler here, heavier with stillness, as if the garden itself is holding its breath. Vines hang like drapes between slender trees, and the ground is soft with fallen blossoms. The scent? A layered perfume of sacred woods, dried petals, faint ash, and something metallic you can't quite place. This was not a public part of the royal gardens. Only priests, astronomers, and selected herbalists were allowed here. And you, for tonight only. You walk softly now, even your footsteps. Feel too loud for this space. Mainstream fact. The Khmer ceremonial groves served as both botanical sanctuaries and ritual sites. They held plants used in offerings to ancestors, blessings for newborns, and protections during eclipses or coronations. Certain roots were harvested only under a full moon, others required fasting beforehand. Some plants were never harvested. At all, they were simply present. Your fingers brush a tall, thin stalk crowned with a blood-red bloom. This is Dock Somlork, the bleeding orchid. It doesn't actually bleed, but its nectar was used in royal mourning rituals. When a king died, attendants would scatter these blossoms over the palace floor, each one a silent prayer. Just beside it, a slender bush with curled white petals, Pika Kon. Translated as soul bloom, it opened only after midnight and was believed to call wandering spirits home. Brides wore it in their hair during wedding night prayers. Children were given its due to soothe fevered dreams. You reach out to one, its petal closes on your fingertip like a sigh. Fringe tidbit. One royal astrologer reportedly cultivated a hybrid plant in this grove with leaves shaped like stars. He called it sky tongue, claiming it whispered prophecies. If you boiled it under an eclipse. Modern botanists have found no record of this species, but oddly, local bees still refuse to land in this corner of the grove. You follow a path of smooth stones shaped like lotus petals. It leads to a wide circular glade, its center marked by a large stone basin, black granite, cool to the touch. This is where sacred infusions were prepared, water steeped with memory herbs, sleep flowers, whisper bark. The basin still smells, faintly of jasmine and pepper. Historians still argue whether the basin was used for anointing or drinking. Khmer texts are poetic, not practical. One scroll refers to the liquid as eye milk for dreaming, another just calls it truth water. Whether it cleansed the body, the soul, or merely one's reputation, that depends on who you ask. You kneel beside the basin and peer in. Rainwater has pooled there. Floating on the surface are a few dry petals, ghosts of blooms long gone. You can't help yourself. You dip a finger in. The water is cold and tingles faintly. A breeze moves through the grove, then slow, deliberate, like a dancer changing steps. The vines shift. One leaf spins lazily. A bird calls once, then falls silent. Your eye catches something small near. The grove's edge, a cluster of mushrooms, pale blue and faintly glowing. The Khmer called them moon teeth. They were neither food nor medicine. They were symbols, emblems of impermanence, growth in decay. A reminder that the garden never really sleeps. A carved stone stands just beyond the mushrooms. You brush away the moss. The engraving shows a tree with 4 trunks, each twisting in a different direction: life, death, dream, and memory. Around its roots dancers swirl. At the base, a single herb, its name lost to time. You sit here for a while. The grove seems to approve. Above you, fireflies blink like ancient runes in the air. They float in loops and spirals, tracing forgotten hymns. The only soundtrack is your breath and the distant rustle of palm fronds. You think about the people who once stood where you sit: healers, emperors, dancers, dreamers, maybe even that sleep-deprived courtier from earlier, still muttering about fishy dreams. They all passed through this garden, barefoot or bejeweled, tired or holy, and now you, the plants here, are quiet, yes, but not passive. They record, absorb, whisper. As you stand to leave, the petals around the basin rustle ever so, slightly, not in wind, in recognition. You nod to the garden. The garden nods back. Ahead, the final path beckons. It leads to the edges of the royal estate, toward the moonlit water groves and the cooling night wind. But before that, one last discovery awaits: the seeds. You follow the path as it coils away from the ceremonial grove, winding through a narrow corridor flanked by tall elephant grass and slender palms. The air is warmer here again, soft with the hush of flowing water nearby. Somewhere up ahead, frogs croak rhythmically like sleepy percussionists. A few fireflies still linger, blinking lazily above your head. The garden hasn't quite let go of you yet. You're approaching the final chamber of the royal garden, the seed vault. It's less a vault in the metal and lock sense, and more of a sacred archive. A memory chest, a library written in soil. And husk, mainstream fact, the Khmer Empire maintained extensive seed reserves in dedicated garden structures, not only for practical agriculture, but as botanical heritage, preserving the lineages of rare fruits, herbs, and flowers that defined royal prestige and sacred rituals. These seeds were stored in climate-stable ceramic jars, wrapped in palm leaf scrolls labeled in Old Khmer script. You arrive at a small stone pavilion. The roof is moss-covered, bowed gently in the middle like an old man's back. The doors are wood, ornately carved with fronds and spirals. They creak softly as you push them open. Inside it's cool and dry. Shelves line the walls, each holding rows of clay pots no bigger than your hand. The room smells of earth, old parchment, and something sharply sweet, like cinnamon bark, left too long in the sun. You lift one jar. It's warm from your touch. The label reads Tarum Sok or Night Peach. This fruit, long vanished from modern Cambodia, was said to glow faintly. Under moonlight and softened dreams, into gentle loops. Women would rub its juice on their temples before bed. Children placed slices under their pillows to keep nightmares at bay. Fringe tidbit: there's a rumor that the emperors had a secret row of these trees grafted in the inner palace, guarded day and night, not for food, but because the scent supposedly made you dream of truths not yet known. Some say they were cut down when one king dreamed he'd be overthrown, and was. You open another jar. Tiny black seeds flecked with silver, Trey boron or fish mint. Not a mint, and definitely not a fish. The plant's leaves were shaped like fins and carried a pungent odor most courtiers hated, except for one famed poet who claimed it helped him think sideways. You smile. The jar smells awful. You return it gently. Historians still argue whether these seeds were purely practical or ritualistic. Some think the garden served as an agricultural testing ground. Others believe it was more like a spiritual insurance policy, ensuring the empire's soul could be replanted if ever destroyed. A few even suggest certain seeds were meant to be passed into the next life, planted not in earth, but in dreams. You turn and notice something in the corner of the room, a large woven basket, partially hidden beneath a silk cloth. You lift it slowly. Inside, seed pods, dozens of them, some cracked open to reveal bright orange beans, others curled tightly like sleeping beetles. The label reads only unknown, gift from traders upriver. You wonder what these grew into. Fruit, medicine, nothing, everything. Maybe the garden knew and just never told anyone. A breeze pushes softly through the doorway behind you. It carries the scent of lotus and damp grass. Time to leave. Not because the garden wants you to go, but because it's ready for rest. You step outside, blinking at the soft moonlight. The path before you leads toward the lily ponds, where frogs and nightbirds call out in lazy, lullaby tones. The stars are thick above you now, crowded into the dark like guests arriving late to a feast. As you pass under a low arch of woven vines, your hand brushes a final branch, slender and leafless, hung with tiny seed bells. They tinkle softly, and for just a second, you feel it, the memory of every plant you've touched tonight, the sweetness of silk fruit, the spice of pepper leaf, the mystery of moon fern. All of it presses gently behind your eyes, not loud, but lingering, you smile. You don't need to remember everything. The garden remembers for you. You're walking now through the final stretch of the royal gardens, the water groves. The air is heavier here, lush, with the mingled perfume of lilies, wet stone, and distant rain. Overhead the moon hangs fat and silvery, like it's been watching your whole journey in quiet approval. Beneath your feet, the path changes. Flat. Wide stepping stones leading across pools of lotus-filled water. The lilies open as you approach like soft applause. You step gently, each movement mirrored in the still water below. Mainstream fact: the Khmer water gardens were masterworks of both engineering and aesthetics. These weren't simple ponds, they were hydrological marvels. Channels fed from nearby, rivers, aquifers, and artificial reservoirs, all managed by sluices carved with dancing apsaras. These groves provided irrigation, cooling air, and beauty, an all-in-one design thousands of years ahead of its time. The empire understood water not just as utility, but as ceremony. Priests would wade into these groves at dusk, trailing incense. Behind them, musicians played reed flutes on the embankments while healers collected dew from sacred lily leaves, drop by drop. You stop at a small platform that juts out over the water. It's ringed by half-submerged columns, each carved with the same symbol, a sun above a fruit tree. This was where the royal family gathered to drink infusions made from garden leaves during lunar festivals. Think royalty ceremony, but with more jasmine, fewer teacups, and a lot more fireflies. Fringe tidbit: one journal from a traveling Chinese monk mentions seeing a ritual here where musicians played floating xylophones, actual instruments made of bamboo, bobbing on the water. Supposedly, the sound changed with the ripples. He called it music played by the moon's breath. You pause to imagine that, and weirdly, you can almost hear it. Historians still argue whether the water groves served more spiritual or political purposes. Some say they were meant to reflect divine symmetry, heaven mirrored on earth. Others suggest they were showcases of power, demonstrations of wealth disguised as relaxation. Either way, they worked. You feel calmer just standing here. You crouch beside the edge of the pond and trace a finger along a lily pad. It's smooth, cool, the size of a dinner plate. Beneath it, tiny fish dart like whispered secrets. You can't help but smile. A low hum rises nearby, not machinery, just frogs, starting their nightly chorus. Their rhythm syncs with the gentle ripple of water, the rustle of reeds, and the faint creak of bamboo in the breeze. Even the air seems to sway in rhythm. This isn't just a garden. It's a lullaby written in soil and stone. You stand and take one last slow lap around the edge. The garden gives no speeches, no farewells. It doesn't need to. Everything it is, has been, is here, folded into every petal, every leaf, every faint echo in the night air. And just before you leave, you notice a final plant. It's a strange little bush, barely a foot high, with golden bulbs dangling like teardrops. You don't recognize it. The label is worn and faded, almost unreadable. You kneel to squint. The ink has all but vanished, except for one word: memory. You blink. Did it just sway? Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it remembers you too. You walk slowly toward the garden gate, which now feels less like an exit and more like a gentle boundary. The kind you cross without really noticing. The garden fades behind you, wrapped again in darkness and dew. But the scent lingers. So does the hush. And maybe, just maybe, a seed of it tucks into your thoughts, quiet as breath, waiting to bloom again the next time you close your eyes. And now, dear listener, we let the garden grow quiet. The water groves settle into stillness, their ripples smoothing like silk beneath the moon. The air cools, brushing softly against your cheeks as if to say, "You've done enough for today." The echoes of footsteps, yours, fade beneath the archways of fronds and memory. You can almost hear the soft fall of a petal onto stone, the flutter of a moth near the torchlight, the creak of an ancient seed pod waiting for rain. Each plant you passed, every twisted root, every glowing fruit, carries with it stories you no longer need to hold. They're safe now, planted in a dream, deeper than sleep. Your limbs grow heavier, not from fatigue, but from calm. That sweet kind of tired, that wraps around your shoulders like a warm woven shawl. The kind that whispers, no rush, stay here a while longer. And why not? The lilies are still blooming, the frogs are still humming, the scent of lemongrass and wet jasmine still lingers, filling the air with quiet comfort. Let your mind sink gently beneath the surface, like a lotus seed drifting toward silt. Let the thoughts thin out, one by one, until all that's left is breath and breeze. The night is long, the garden is patient, and so are you.